He was a poet, near destitute and alone in the festivity of the Christmas season. The city shouted out its colors, its song, its joy, while skirting around him, almost touching him, but not quite. A gentle soul, shy, retreating, but hungering for companionship on this, the Christmas Eve, when love seemed to whisper louder than any other time. He wandered in search of hope, looking for a promise that would alleviate loneliness and give him a reason to go on. But eyes told him as he wandered that he wasn't welcome, and he retreated to inclement weather and to a deserted park where eyes could no longer accuse him and where snowflakes could touch him without prejudice. He didn't bother to push the cushion of snow off the faded green bench as he sat down. Discomfort had become a habit and was now almost like a companion. And he didn't notice at first the figure that suddenly sat down beside him. It was as though he had just appeared. For a moment he was startled as he turned and saw the grinning face of a man that looked even more tattered than he. A weathered face with gray-white stubble and a bulbous nose red with blue veins and snowflakes on it. His eyes seemed to change from gray to blue, then back again. They were slightly crossed and held a twinkle that might cause one to laugh or at least to smile. Gray puffs of hair stuck out from an old woolen toque over ears that fanned out like two tiny wings in search of a breeze. He had no teeth, which made his grin and appearance even more comical. His clothes were filthy. He huddled in a greatcoat sizes too big for him. He had no laces on his shoes and no socks. He had on woolen gloves with the upper part of each finger missing, and his fingernails were filthy and broken. When he spoke, his voice was more like a rasp, perhaps from too much smoke and alcohol or shouting his challenges to the wind. "Merry Christmas," he said, saliva slipping from the corner of his thin-lipped mouth. The poet was taken aback, unused to anyone speaking to him, let alone waiting for a reply. But he grinned back, returning the salutation. "My name is Joshua," the stranger said, still grinning his toothless grin while flexing his blue fingers in his near-fingerless gloves. "What's your name?" The poet hesitated for a moment, wondering if the stranger might be demented or even dangerous. "David," he finally said. "My name is David." "A good name," Joshua said. "A biblical name. So is mine a biblical name." Then he cackled and slapped his knee. The new-fallen snow exploded from his greatcoat. "I play the harmonica," Joshua said, taking a harmonica from his pocket. And without further ado, he began to play "Hark the Herald Angels Sing." His playing was sweet and melodious, captivating, each note separate and pure, yet so much a part of the full body of the carol. David was enraptured as the music caressed his loneliness and awakened dreams he had never dared dream before. Of laughter and friends, celebrating his talent and his success. Of clean rooms and shared tables, of Christmas cheer and Thanksgiving that he indeed was a part of. Oh, fantasy to be sure, but oh, how heartwarming it was. The harmonica's melody slowly faded and was then gone. And in the silence, it was as though David could hear each snowflake settling on the ground. "Tell me one of your poems," Joshua said. David looked at him in surprise. "How do you know that I write poems?" The old man cackled again. "Oh, I know lots of things most people don't know. I may be derelict, but I'm not stupid. A man can learn a lot if he just doesn't listen to what a person is saying, but listens to what they are not saying as well. A man's silence is often the story of his soul." Oh, David was enthralled with the old man's wisdom and insight. And on top of that, the loneliness had been lifted, allowing two wanderers to share their talents and their dreams. And the snow fell, and they laughed and they talked, sharing the impossible and sharing Christmas in a deserted park in the heart of a tumultuous city. The minutes turned into hours until each was exhausted with the stories told. David, not wanting the deliciousness of the time to end, said to the old man, "My room is small and my food meager, but what I have I would like to share with you. It's too cold to sleep out, and it is Christmas, and I would enjoy your company if you would like to join me." The old man slapped his greatcoat again, Then, with a great toothless grin, leapt to his feet and said, "Well, let's do it then. You supply the feast, and I'll supply the music." They left the park, Joshua playing his harmonica, and David humming along, held fast by the invisible bond of camaraderie. When they reached David's room, the celebration continued, and then it was time to share the half bottle of wine, the stale bread, and the cheese that had to have its mold cut away. It was almost as cold in the room as it was outside, and in the center of the table, the stub of a candle blazed in melted wax of an old cracked saucer. Each at times would warm their hands over it, David with his long tapering fingers, Joshua with his fingerless gloves and dirty fingernails. David looked at Joshua in quiet contentment and said softly, "You have indeed made my Christmas, Joshua. I never thought of receiving a gift, but you have given me the gift of friendship and encouragement and music. I am forever grateful. Would you ask a blessing over this poor fare? It's our Savior's birthday, so let us celebrate him." Joshua did not grin this time. It was as though his face lost its derelict appearance, and when he spoke, it was no longer with a rasp. His voice was soft and melodious, authoritative and yet gentle. His eyes stayed blue and seemed to delve into David's very soul. He said, almost in a whisper, "I was a stranger, David, and yet you invited me into your home. You knew I was hungry and thirsty, and you have invited me to share the little you have. You've offered me shelter in your only blanket. You saw my appearance, but you didn't judge me or turn away. Oh, indeed, I shall bless this food, but I shall also bless you with a kind and prosperous future, and people to recognize not only your fine talent, but the gentleness of your soul." With that said, Joshua raised his hands, then removed his fingerless gloves. Holding his hands over the sparse meal, he said words David could no longer hear. For on the palm of each of Joshua's hands were wounds, as though they had been made by nails. And then suddenly, Joshua was gone, disappeared in the blinking of an eye. David sat there in a stupor, his heart racing, his mind swirling, his thoughts crashing. And then he fell into a deep sleep and dreamed of angels and peaceful valleys where time stood still. When he awoke, it was morning. The room was cold and quiet. The snow had stopped falling outside his window, and the candle had gone out, burned to a nub. The half bottle of wine sat on the table untouched, as was the cheese and the bread. Had he dreamed it? Had it indeed been only a dream? The park, the music, the sharing. What else could it be but a dream? David needed to walk, to clear his head, to collect his thoughts. He rose from the table and began heading for the door. Then, glancing back, he stopped in his tracks. For on the chair, opposite to the one he'd been sitting on, sat an old battered harmonica and a pair of dilapidated gloves that had no fingers.